are recording just so that we can put this accessible via our website for anyone who isn't able to attend. Obviously, we've got applicants from around the world, so time zones and things, it's useful for us to have a record that's available. And if there's any information you miss, the recording and the slides will be available on our website. So don't worry if you don't get everything down, it will all be made clear. So, good morning, everyone. My name's Jo Malt. I am the Director of the London Arts and Humanities Partnership, and I'm a professor in my other life of French at King's College London. I'll ask my two colleagues to introduce themselves as well. Gillian, we've already seen you.
Yes, hi everyone, I'm Gillian Harrison. I'm the Senior Support Officer at LAHP, and I mainly focus on the collaborations and partnerships.
And Tony?
Hi everyone, I'm Tony. I'm one of two Deputy Directors of LAHP. My particular remit is to cover training and cohort development. And outside of LAHP, I'm based at the Royal Central School of Speech and Drama.
Great, thank you. So we will get straight on, I think, with the slides and give you an overview of the competition, how it works, what we offer at LAHP, and how the application process unfolds. So when you're ready, Gillian. Great.
Can everyone see that? Yeah.
I can certainly see it. Please do shout if you can't. Yeah, looks good, I think. Yeah, I think we're good. Okay. So I think we can go to the next slide already. So first of all, a little bit about what LAHP is and what we do and what we offer. So LAHP, London Arts and Humanities Partnership, is a doctoral training partnership co-funded by the Arts and Humanities Research Council. That's one of the councils of UKRI. So essentially that's a government-funded research body in the UK. And we're co-funded then with from the HRC and from the 8 university partners, which I'll talk about in just a minute. We fund up to 90 PhD studentships a year across the arts and humanities, across those 8 institutions. Of these, 10% are collaborative doctoral awards, and those involve working with a cultural or other external partner. Today, we're just going to be talking about the other 80%, so we won't be focusing on collaborative doctoral awards today. There's plenty of information about those on our website. If you have specific questions, do put those in the chat and we can direct you towards those that information. But mainly today, we're going to be focusing on the open studentship competition, which is, if you like, the remaining 81 of those studentships that we give every year. Up to 30% of our studentships can be awarded to international students. That's a UKRI regulation, so we are capped. We are only allowed to award a maximum of 30% of our studentships to international students, and we'll say a bit more about that in just a minute. And we also have dedicated awards, ring-fenced awards, for Black and global majority students. So that's students from Black and minority ethnic backgrounds in the UK, UK students, and for other underrepresented groups. As part of our work on equity, diversity and inclusion, we've created some categories where we ring fence awards. I'll say a bit more about that in just a minute. So next slide, Gillian. This is us. So you can see there's me and Tony who are on the call, and also Gillian at the end there. We're joined by Marquard Smith, who is our other Deputy Director who focuses on collaborations and partnerships, and by our LAHP manager, Mispa, although Mispa is going to be leaving us quite soon. So by the time any of you are students, she won't be with us anymore. But that's who we are now. Next slide, Gillian. Yeah, so those are our roles. And then these are the 8 universities which are members of LAHP. So we'll refer to these sometimes as HEIs, higher education institutions, just because some of them aren't technically called universities. So that's why. So if you hear the acronym HEI, that's what we mean. It's one of these 8 institutions that are part of LAHP. So King's College London, London School of Economics and Political Science, Queen Mary University of London, Royal Central School of Speech and Drama, Royal College of Art, Royal College of Music, the School of Advanced Study of the University of London, and UCL. So in order to be eligible for funding from us, you need to be applying to one of those 8 institutions. Next slide, Gillian. We also have a number of core non-HEI partners, so non-university partners in the cultural sector. So our core partners are the Victoria and Albert Museum, the Wellcome Collection, Google Arts and Culture, the Museum of London, the Live Art Development Agency, and the National Archives of the UK. And we'll say a little bit more about how we work with those partners in just a bit. Thanks. Now, we welcome applications to our studentship competition across all of our subject areas and approaches in the arts and humanities, including interdisciplinary research and practice-based research. We welcome applications from people who've recently completed master's programs or indeed are currently still finishing master's programs, and also applicants with relevant professional or practitioner experience. And I'll say a bit more about how you can talk about your professional and or practitioner experience in your application when we get to that part of today's presentation. We welcome applications for full-time or part-time study. No distinction is made between those two, and from applicants of all ages and backgrounds. Thanks, Gillian. As I mentioned, we can award 30% of our studentships, including the stipend. So the stipend is the money that we give you to live on as part of your grant. Fauzia, yes, I'm going to come to that. Hold on, I will answer that question in just a minute. So the one thing that I have to explain about international applications is that the AHRC will only fund the home fee. So as many of you will know, there's often a distinction made between in terms of the fees that are charged to students who are classified as home for fee purposes or international for fee purposes. The difference between the home and international fee must be found elsewhere. And if you are an international applicant, you should inquire with your prospective supervisor whether the university you're applying to can potentially cover this fee difference. If the institution is able to cover the fee difference, this will be confirmed in your award letter further down the line if you are awarded a studentship. We encourage all international applicants to apply to additional funding sources where you can to cover that difference between the home and international fee, as there's no guarantee that your university will be able to cover that difference. What I would say about that is that by and large, our 8 university partners do generally have funding available to cover that difference. So in most cases, that can be covered, but we can't guarantee it. So it's worth asking the university that you're applying to. And please note that your fee status, so whether you're a home fee or international fee student, will be determined by the university you're applying to and not by us. So if you have queries about whether you would be categorized as a home student or international student, you'll need to direct those to the university that you're applying for, because we don't make that decision. Okay, thanks, Gillian. I think, Tony, if you're able, there might be a question. Brilliant. Thank you, Tony. Tony's already on it in the chat with some questions. So I mentioned these ring-fenced awards that we have for Black and Global Majority students and applicants of Gypsy, Traveller and Roma heritage, sorry. So this is, as I mentioned, part of our effort to address underrepresentation amongst these categories and others of applicants. So structural inequalities have meant that there's a significant underrepresentation of Black and Global Majority doctoral students and students of Gypsy, Traveller or Roma heritage. And we're committed to increasing the number of awards made to doctoral students from these groups. So we have committed to give a minimum of 5 studentships to home fee Black and Global Majority applicants. So bear in mind that these are only for home fee applicants. And of those 5, we'll award a minimum of 3 to Black British applicants, because those are Black British applicants are one of the most underrepresented groups in our student cohorts and indeed in doctoral study in the UK overall. In addition to that, we have ring-fenced a minimum of 1 studentship to be awarded to home fee status applicants of Gypsy, Traveller or Roma heritage. So all applicants who are eligible are invited to apply in the normal way, and there's a tick box if you are eligible. If you identify in any of those categories as a home fee student, then tick that box and you will be considered eligible. There's no special process for that. We simply will ensure that of our ranked applicants, we will ensure that if we have sufficient ranked applicants, which we will do, we will make a minimum of those numbers of awards in those categories to students who have declared themselves eligible in that way. Okay, next slide. Studentship. So what do you get from LAHP? Funding is for 3 years for open studentship open studentship awards, and that's 3.5 years for the collaborative doctoral awards, which I mentioned at the beginning, because those are somewhat more complicated in different ways. We give a bit extra funding for those. So that's 3 years for full-time study or the equivalent for part-time. So if you're studying part-time, you would normally be eligible for 6 years worth of part-time funding. There's the possibility for a further 6 months additional funding if you want to complete a placement or extended training, and we'll say more about that in just a moment. If you have that extension, your final deadline remains the same, so that doesn't affect the time that you have to complete and submit your PhD. Now, this was the question that came up in the chat already. If you have already started your PhD, yes, you can apply, provided you have not completed more than 1 year full-time study by the time you start your award. So if you started this October and you're full-time and you will be applying for funding to start next October, then you are eligible. If you'll have done more than 1 year full-time or up to 3 years or more than 3 years part-time by the time of funding starting, then you wouldn't be eligible. So only students who are within that time period but have already started are eligible. And if you are successful, you will be awarded for the remaining normal registration time, so 2 years full-time or 3 to 5 years part-time, depending on your circumstances. So we don't start the clock again with the funding. You'll be funded for the remaining period of your PhD. So I hope that answers that question. Next slide, please, Gillian. I hope you will have already gathered that equity, diversity and inclusion is really, really central to everything we do at LAHP. So we're strongly committed to promoting equality, equity, diversity and inclusion in all aspects of our work, to provide equality of opportunity for all our applicants, students and staff, to provide a welcoming and supportive community in which everyone can learn, work and interact without fear of discrimination, prejudice or harassment. And we commit that all applicants, students, staff, supervisors and stakeholders will be treated equitably and will not be accorded less favourable treatment on the grounds of any of those characteristics. So gender, marital civil partnership, status, sexual orientation, gender reassignment, race, colour, nationality, ethnicity or national origins, religion or similar philosophical belief, spent criminal convictions, age or disability. So that's our fundamental commitment to equity, diversity and inclusiveness. Next slide, Gillian. Training. I'm going to hand over to Tony for this one. Tony, I'll take over in the chat if you want.
Sorry, I was just in the middle of a...
sorry.
I'll leap in then. Hi, everyone. Yes, so as I mentioned earlier on, my responsibility is for the training side of LAHP. The doctoral training partnership has the word training in it, and that's because when the AHRC funded the consortia that would of which LAHP is one, they really wanted us to place training at the centre of our activities. What does that mean for you? It means that you would be undertaking a minimum of 10 days training over the 3 years of your study. That's the minimum requirement, but obviously we would invite you to do more than that. And all the evidence shows that the more you engage with training around PhD research, the more likely you are to succeed in the process. The training is not simply training in terms of the research, training for the research. We also are required to train the researcher. So you'll see here that we have a number of planks of activity, and that kind of cuts across those two sorts of areas, training the researcher and training for the research. So if you just quickly run through these, sorry about that, I'm going to ping occasionally, I'm afraid. So the first one is languages. So the first plank of training is language courses. This is delivered by King's Language Centre. We run approximately 17 classes a year, and it includes languages such as Arabic, French, German, Italian, Japanese, Mandarin, Russian, and Spanish. And also this year we're running Latin. These are delivered at various levels, beginner, intermediate, and advanced. It really depends very much on student demand, to be honest, which of those sessions run and how advanced they become. This one thing to point out about this kind of language training is this is an invitation to anyone studying a PhD to learn another language. So you don't need to be studying in the particular language that you're interested in. You could just do a language training session as an additional skill. Again, this is about training the researcher rather than training for the research. The second one is research skills and methodologies, which is probably fairly self-evident, but effectively that is looking at sessions designed to help craft, shape the PhD, looking at things such as explanatory strategies, the positioning of the researcher, positioning in the field, that is, and sessions to do with conference presentation, writing abstracts, and so on. I'm sure you've come across sessions like this already. The third is EDI training and resilience training. This is more sort of broadly cohort focused. So we have a series of, it's a modular based program of blended allyship training, which also involves one-to-one mentoring and small group work for people who want to get have a particular interest in working around questions of allyship. We also run things such as trans awareness sessions, working as a neurodivergent researcher, and a number of well-being sessions too. Professional skills, networking, and careers, again, fairly straightforward and self-evident, but obviously there we're looking at how you can develop the skills you've picked up as a researcher in terms of moving forward in your career, whether you're interested in developing a career in academia or in some area outside of academia, but which has a research focus. So a number of sessions are delivered each year to kind of support an understanding of how best to approach that kind of work environment. Public engagement and impact is it's one of those areas that has become more and more prominent within the research councils over the past few years. It's sort of risen up the research agenda in terms of funding, and so we see it as a very important part of the training we offer for you to think about how the research you're doing can reach a wider audience beyond the audience, the obvious audience, which is the immediate academic audience you're writing for. So how does the research you're doing have a broader societal impact beyond the disciplinary field? So these sessions they tend to be run by our non-HEI partners. So we're talking about the National Archives, the Museum of London, and the V&A. They're absolute experts in this area, and one of the great things about LAHP is that we are able to mobilize this kind of broad base of expertise, not just within higher education, but in other sectors too. And then the final one here is digital arts and humanities. Again, these are sessions very much targeted at understanding the kind of the rather diffuse and growing role of digital research methodologies in the arts and humanities. Gillian, if I could move to the next slide, thanks. Oh, I think actually this is over to you, Gillian. This is first bit placements.
Thanks, Tony. Just to let you know, Mispa's on a call as well, so there might be a bit of background, but I'll do a quick run through of placements. So LAHP offers a placement scheme to all Open Studentship students and CDA students. And this is the opportunity to go on a placement with a cultural or other partner and gain experience in areas not necessarily related to your research project. So there are several different ways you can approach this. Sorry, excuse me. You can approach a partner yourself and suggest a placement opportunity, or you can apply for one of the advertised placements that we have, or you can approach one of our current partners with an idea as well. So we offer funding for your placement period, so your stipend payments would continue throughout the placement, and then you'd have additional funding at the end of your funding period. So you don't have to worry about the cost of doing the placement. I'm going to hand back to Tony because there's a bit of background.
Thanks, Gillian. So the other thing here, which is a really great opportunity for LAHP students, is the additional funding that you receive by becoming a LAHP student. So I'm just going to run through the schemes very briefly that we make available to students in LAHP. So the first is the LAHP Research Support Fund, which means that any student has up to can draw down up to £3,000 over the course of the 3 years of the funded studentship, in addition to the funding they get. So £3,000 to cover expenses such as UK-based or overseas study visits to libraries or museums or special collections. For example, we've just recently funded somebody to go and spend some time at the Samuel Beckett archive to look through Beckett's letters. Then we also use this fund to support fieldwork, which is part of the primary research. So, for example, one student has just been funded to go and spend several weeks in the rainforest of the Republic of Congo. They're going to be working with indigenous peoples on animal tracking techniques. It's an example of the kind of funding we're talking about here, the activity. And it can also be used to, if you're an artist and your mode of doing research is through practice-based or practice-led research, then you can also use this fund to support the purchase of materials for that work. The second is the LAHP Language Fund. That's different from the language training which I mentioned previously. The LAHP Language Fund is up to £500, and it's per application, and it's specifically designed for specialist language training that is relevant to the research, to the primary research. So, for example, if you were doing some research that required a particular training in a particular Arab dialect, that would be the fund you would apply for. There's the third one is the LAHP Extension Fund, which funds an additional 6 months of the Studentship Award, and that's to undertake specialist skills training of a substantive nature, or if the research involves trying to bridge the gap between higher education and some kind of non-academic community. That's what this funding can be very useful for funding. The fourth funding pot is called the Impact, Engagement and Entrepreneurship Fund, which is up to £600. And this is really just to develop the impacts of the research through public engagement activities, or to fund startups. One example of that is which we use in our training. In fact, it was developed by one of our students, graduates called Ariana Walcott, who developed a project called Project Myopia, which is looking at training teachers in terms of the activities around decolonizing the classroom. A very interesting PhD she developed, and then use that to the base of a PhD to really start to explore how to actually work with the higher education community. And so we are one of her clients. Final fund, which is the Student-Led Activities Fund. This is basically, obviously we provide a lot of training opportunities, but there might be bespoke forms of training that you want to explore, which might be of benefit to other students within the consortium. So this is a fund that you can draw down to lead. Maybe it's a kind of conference or a seminar series. It's fairly open in terms of the activities you can develop. If you go to the next slide. So I'm just going to go to the final bullet point there, which is the networks, student-led networks. So we can use the funding, which I just previously mentioned, to fund a student network. And we have a number of these running currently, these are Black and Global Majority Network, the Women's Researchers Network, and Practice-Based Research Network. But what we do is we invite any student to, if they want to develop their own network, to do so. And as I say, we can help fund and support that activity. We also run a broad range of cohort development events. These are really networking events, so you get to meet students from other institutions within LAHP. It's a great opportunity to do so, to see what else is going on within the research community of which you're a part. And these tend to be focused around things such as, well, we had it yesterday, we had our end of term event, which was a very pleasant event, which we held at the Bishopsgate Institute last night. And in May, we'll be having our annual research day, which is, again, another opportunity for students to get together, to network, to share some research, there's presentations and prizes. And yeah, they tend to be kind of fairly relaxed, semi-formal, fairly informal opportunities to get to know each other, really. I think that might be my last slide, but if you go to the next one, we'll see. Yes, it is indeed. Back to you, Jo.
Yeah, that's me. I think I'm more or less up to date, Tony, with the chat, but there might be, don't worry, if anyone's wondering about the recording, we will make the recording available to you, so don't worry about that. If you've missed anything, you will get a second chance to go over it and also to see the slides. I think about the last 2 or 3, Tony, if you could take over. So we're going to come now to talking about the practicalities of the application process. So if you have questions about deadlines, about the process, about what you should write in your statement, those answers are coming to those questions. So the competition is now open as of the 27th of November. So the portal is available for you to start on your application as soon as you are ready. So you will need to fill in your application via the portal, and the deadline for receipt of applications is the 26th of January at 5 p.m. Now, I need to be really clear about this. This is a hard deadline. I'm afraid whatever happens, if you're ill, if your supervisor's ill, if something comes up, I'm afraid we cannot give extensions on this deadline under any circumstances. So it's worth being really, really clear about that, and do not leave your application to the last minute. So because we won't be able to consider it. We will, what we will need by that date is your application completed and a statement from your prospective supervisor. Okay, I'll say a bit more about that in just a minute, but just be aware that you will need both those elements completed by the 26th of January. So in practice, that means that you probably need to get your own statement, your own proposal ready well before then, so that you can give your prospective supervisor time to do their statement. Again, I'll say more about that. So if you have questions, just hold off. So by mid-March in 2024, you need to be in receipt of an offer for your chosen PhD program. Now, in order to apply to us, sorry, I missed this by the 26th of January, you need to have applied to one of our 8 partner universities. Okay, you don't need to have been accepted. We recognize that that can take a while, but you need to have applied. So if you haven't applied to your intended university by the 26th of January, your application to us for funding will not be considered. So you will normally be in receipt of an offer by mid-March. That will be checked by our staff. And then on the 28th of April, or shortly after then, we aim to issue our first round of offers of awards. That's the point at which we will start making offers to successful candidates, and we will give successful candidates 2 weeks from the date of offer to accept or decline the award. So just be aware that from that time, you need to be checking your email. You'll have 2 weeks to give us your decision, because obviously we will have a waiting list. Just to give you an idea, we usually receive around 600 applications a year for 81, maximum of 81 studentships in our open competition. So competition is fierce. We don't want our funding to go to waste, so we give successful candidates 2 weeks to accept. Otherwise, we will then move down our waiting list. 1st of October 2024 is the date when our studentships begin. So from that time, you would be in receipt of fees and stipend. Next slide, please, Gillian. What are we looking for then? So what do you need to show us to be successful in our competition? These are our criteria. You can see all of this information on our website also. So please do bear them in mind as you start preparing your application. Our scoring works like this. So the quality of the research proposal, so the research that you propose to complete for your program, is worth 50% of your score. The preparedness of the student is worth 25%, and the feasibility of the proposed research is worth 25%. And I'll say more about that. Next slide, Gillian. So I'm going to give a bit more detail in each of those categories. What are we looking for? So quality of the research proposal, as I said, that's worth 50%. We're looking for the significance, originality, and clarity of the program, of the proposed research. So the significance of the underpinning ideas, aims, and research questions. How well formulated are they? How original are they? How clearly thought through? So research design, methodology, and or sources, the suitability of the proposal for doctoral research. So is this the kind of research that's suited for a PhD? And dissemination and potential impact. So who will you communicate your research to, and how, and what's the potential impact both within an immediate field and also potentially across different fields and beyond academia. So how do you demonstrate this in your application? You will have space in your research proposal. You'll also be asked to do a non-technical summary and to give key references. So I'll say more about that in just a minute, but essentially the non-technical summary is a short summary of your research, proposed research, aimed at a non-specialist audience. You can also demonstrate this, or rather your supervisor can, your proposed supervisor, by their own statement in which they will give supporting information or supporting insights about your research proposal. Next one. So next category, preparedness of student, worth 25%. This is where you need to tell us about your previous academic achievements in relevant subject areas and I should stress that relevant professional or practitioner experience. And that's particularly for applicants with non-standard academic trajectories. So if you've had a career as a professional or as a practitioner, which is relevant to your research, that's where you can describe that to us and tell us how it qualifies you to complete this program of research. So all of your relevant knowledge, skills, and or training you would need to outline here. So what skills are you bringing? What knowledge are you bringing to this project? And how is that going to help you to complete the research successfully? And how you're demonstrating this can be academic qualifications, both those that have been awarded and those that are pending. Professional or practitioner experience, so you can outline that and give us information in your personal statement, and your supervisor can also discuss this in their supporting statement. Next slide. Feasibility of the proposed research. What do we mean by that? Is it likely that you can complete it within the time frame? Have you identified, and has your supervisor identified, your training needs? So what training will you need to complete in order to enable you to successfully complete the research? Is your field work or study visits, anything you need to do, such as archive work, field work, travel, is that well justified? Is it clear why you would need to do that and how that would work and how it would be integrated into the program of research? And how good is the fit between you and your proposed supervisor and the wider intellectual culture of the department, of the institution, and indeed of LAHP? So tell us a little bit about how that environment, the department, the institution, and LAHP, how will that environment help you to complete your program of research? And where you can demonstrate this, you're invited to give a research timetable for completion, to talk about your additional training needs. So we don't expect you to have done all of the training that you need. As Tony's outlined, we offer significant amounts of training, both specialist and general. If you need additional training that's very specialized to your own research project, we can help you to fund that. So what we're wanting here is not necessarily a statement of all of the training you have received, but identification of training you would need that we can help you get in order to complete your research. So you can outline this in your research proposal, in your personal statement, and the supervisor can also discuss this in their own statement. Next slide. Before you apply, things to bear in mind: make sure you're eligible for AHRC funding. Now, there have been quite a few questions already in the chat about eligible subject areas. If you follow the links from our website, you can see how the AHRC defines what is arts and humanities research. So please have a look at that. That's our guide on what subject areas we fund. Also, I suggest strongly that if you're in doubt, particularly perhaps for those of you where you might be on the cusp between arts and humanities research and social science research, the Economic and Social Science Research Council also funds doctoral awards in a similar way. That's the ESRC. So have a discussion with your prospective supervisor. Is this project better suited to AHRC funding or to ESRC funding? There are many subject areas where there's a potential gap. So discuss that with your supervisor and they should be able to advise you. Make sure you've applied for a PhD place or you already have a place. Some of you may have already started your research. Make sure you've discussed your proposal and your application with your proposed primary supervisor, and make sure that you and the department has identified 2 potential supervisors. Now, these could be first and second supervisors. They may both be in the same institution or they may be in different LAHP institutions. We just need the names of your 2 prospective supervisors. As I say, they can be same or different institutions. And we just need a statement from the first of those supervisors, not both of them. The first supervisor will make a statement and will also name and describe the second supervisor. So next slide. So what's in the form? A personal statement. You've got 600 words for that. These are the questions that you want to be answering in that section. What knowledge, skills, and training would you bring to the project? How and why is the proposed research suitable for a LAHP studentship? So in terms of subject area, in terms of the community, in terms of the emphasis, the training. How would you seek to benefit from and contribute to LAHP? How might you want to engage with different audiences and organisations during your research? The supervisor statement, that needs to cover both supervisors, as I mentioned, and give their relevant research experience, their supervisory experience, and total number of current students. And they've got 200 words per supervisor. As I say, normally the first supervisor can answer on behalf of both supervisors. They're also invited to give us up to 300 words on the quality of the proposed research, so on your proposal, the preparedness of you, the applicant, and the feasibility of the proposed research. So they have a section to comment on each of those elements of the application. Next one. So, as I mentioned, the portal will be open. The link is on our website. It's through the system FlexiGrant, and we will require then 1,200 words, up to 1,200 words on your research proposal, where you cover the significance, originality, the underpinning ideas and aims, research questions, research design, methodology, and all sources. And you're invited to give up to 10 key references that you cite in the proposal. So that's your opportunity to give a sense of the critical material, the existing material that you're in dialogue with, and that you might want to cite in your proposal. So give us an idea of what the key sources will be for your project. Next slide. Now, I'm moving on here to our process. So how are we making the decisions? We divide our applications into these subject area groups. So obviously, we're covering a very broad range of subject areas, and we break them down into these 4 subcategories. So those are what we call our disciplinary clusters, A1, A2, B, and C. And within those disciplinary clusters, we have a number of subject area groups. So those are what we call our SAGs, our subject area groups. And those are panels of experts drawn from across our... Ooh, sorry, I think somebody's unmuted there. Can I ask everyone just to make sure that they're on mute, please? I think it might be Natalia. Natalia, can you please make sure you're on mute? Sorry, I don't know if I can mute her. Gillian, can you see if you can mute Natalia?
Yeah, I'll have a look.
Thank you. So those are the subject areas. So we will invite you to specify. Natalia, sorry, Natalia D'Amigo, could you mute, please? Yeah, sorry. Could everyone please make sure they're on mute? Sorry, Gillian, you might have to boot her out.
Sorry, just trying to find her on the list.
I think she's muted. Right. Sorry about that. Architecture, sorry, there's a question. Architecture would come under design, generally speaking. Yeah. So you'd be invited to specify. We will also check which panel your application is best suited to. So we have some time built into our processes. We will invite the chairs of each of the subject area groups to check through all the applications attributed to them and to make sure that they fit, and to invite us to redirect them to a different panel if we think that panel is a better fit for them. So those are our subject area groups. Specialists from across our 8 institutions will gather and will review, evaluate, and rank those applications according to the criteria. And then those rankings will be passed on to the disciplinary cluster. And those will be interleaved so that we come up in the end with one single overall ranking list. Now, there are lots of questions about eligibility. What I would say about this is don't worry too much. If your project is interdisciplinary, for example, choose the discipline which you think is perhaps the majority fit, the best fit, and we will deal with that. We will draw on expertise as needed to ensure that your project gets given full consideration according to, you know, its own priorities. So don't worry too much about that. Likewise, if you are, for example, applying in history, you'll see that we have 3 history subject area groups: medieval and early modern, modern pre-1945, and modern post-1945. Well, it may be that your project spans modern pre and post-1945. That's absolutely fine. Just direct it to the panel that you think it fits more clearly, and you will not be disadvantaged. So you will be your application will be considered on its merits by historians who obviously will understand that some of your sources may be pre-1945, some post-1945, for example. Again, please discuss with your prospective supervisor so that you take some advice about where you think this will fit, but don't worry too much about it. So those panels will convene in March. The disciplinary clusters will convene in April. And so by the 28th of April, we aim to have our final list of awardees, and we will start making our awards from then. So next slide, Gillian. Final advice. Competition is very strong Last year, we had 545 applications for 81 potential awards. The previous year, it was over 600, and in some years, it has been as many as 700. So, you know, it is very competitive. Start thinking about your statement, your proposal as soon as possible. You're very welcome to go into the application portal and look, see what's needed, start drafting and save drafts before you submit. So we recommend that you go on fairly soon and have a look so that you know which sections there are, how long the sections are, what's needed. Look at the LAHP website to find out more about current PhD research projects, what we're currently funding. That can be useful in seeing what kinds of projects we already fund. Find a potential supervisor as soon as you have a project in mind, following the process appropriate to your chosen HEI. You will know, it's worth noting that some institutions, I'm thinking here particularly of LSE and also the Royal College of Art, in some instances, they will invite you to apply to the department and they may allocate the supervisor subsequently, depending on which supervisors are available, are best suited and have capacity. So follow the process that's appropriate to your institution where you're applying, take their advice on that, but be sure that they know that a supervisor will need to be available to write your statement by the deadline. Take your time in writing your research proposal and personal statement. Take advice if you can. Read the online guidance while you're doing it. Get it read through by readers that you trust, whether it's advisors, your prospective supervisor. Get some feedback and take your time and revise it so that you're sure it's giving the best. You're sure it's giving the best indication of the strengths of your proposal. So I think there are lots of questions coming in the chat, but I'm going to take this. I'm going to at this point invite anyone who wants to ask a question out loud.